request everyone to please switch off their mobile phones or keep them on silent before we begin the guest lecture. I would like to welcome Dr. Vijay Govindarajan on behalf of KG Soma Institute for Management Studies and Research. Before we begin the guest lecture today, I request everyone to please stand up for the prayer.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Ishavasya Sarvam Yatkim Cha Jagatyam Jagat Tena Tyaktena Bunjitha Mamrudakasya Sviddhanam Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yatkrupa tamaham vande paramananda madhavam. Om prano devi saraswati vaje virvajinivati deenamavityavatu. Om chodayitri sunrutanam chetanti sumatinam yajnam dadhe saraswati. Om asatoma sadgamaya tamasoma jyotirgamaya mrityorma mritam gamaya. Om sahana bhavatu sahanau bhunaktu sahaviryam karavavahai tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Sarvetra sukhinah santu sarve santu niramayah सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखमाप्नुयात्. ओम शांति शांति शांति.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Vijay Govindarajan, popularly known as VG, is widely regarded as one of the world's leading experts on strategy and innovation. He is the Cox Distinguished Professor at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth College and Marvin Boer Fellow at Harvard Business School. The Cox Distinguished Professorship is a new Dartmouth-wide faculty chair. He was the first professor in residence and chief innovation consultant at General Electric. He worked with GE CEO Jeff Immelt to write How GE is Disrupting Itself, the Harvard Business Review article that pioneered the concept of reverse innovation, any innovation that is adopted first in the developing world. HBR picked reverse innovation as one of the great moments in management in last century. In the latest Thinkers 50 rankings, Govindarajan is rated #1 Indian management thinker. I would now request Honorable Director Dr. Satish Elavadi to please present the bouquet to VG. Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. VG.
What exactly do we mean about reverse innovation? You see, historically, companies innovated in a rich country like the US and sold those products in a poor country like India. Reverse innovation is doing exactly the opposite. It's about innovating in a poor country like India and selling those products in a rich country like the US. By the way, when I use the word rich country and poor country, I'm not trying to make any value judgments here. This is not about whether a country is desirable to live or not. This is strictly the World Bank definition. World Bank takes the average GDP per capita and draws a line. any country which is below the line is supposed to be a poor country. And according to that definition, there are 160 poor countries in the world. Now, when you stop to think about it, reverse innovation is a completely counterintuitive idea. Why? Because it's perfectly logical to see why a poor man would want a rich man's product. Rich man is driving a car, poor man wants a car. Rich man has a cell phone, and this poor lady, she wants a cell phone. But it's not that logical to see why a rich man would want a poor man's product. That's the essence of reverse innovation. And I contend reverse innovation will fundamentally transform just about every industry. Whether we are talking about manufacturing, high-tech, low-tech, consumer products, energy, education, healthcare, reverse innovation has the potential to be the most significant growth opportunity for corporations going forward. Let me highlight, by taking two industries, why a rich man would want a poor man's product. The first industry I'm going to use is healthcare. And I want you to imagine for a moment a rich country like the US. And think about how does the healthcare industry look like in the US. First of all, we spend a lot of money on healthcare in the US. And even after spending all that money, our quality is not world class. And even after spending all that money, we cannot guarantee healthcare to every American. So the healthcare industry in the US is characterized by very high costs, not necessarily best-in-class quality, certainly cannot guarantee universal access. Suppose I tell you there are innovations going on in the healthcare industry in poor countries, which are based on ultra-low-cost healthcare, world-class quality healthcare, and universal access. Wouldn't the rich guy not be interested? Here is the first example. This first example comes from General Electric. GE, in their healthcare division, they make medical imaging equipment. This would be a CAT scanner or an X-ray machine, an ultrasound machine, or what you see here is an electrocardiogram or ECG. An ECG is the first point of diagnosis for heart attack. GE innovated this machine for the American consumer. This is an extraordinarily powerful machine. This has saved lives. This has saved millions of American lives. And this ECG machine costs about $20,000. I want you to imagine, how does a US hospital operate? If you walk into a US hospital, what you are likely to see is a sophisticated imaging center. And in that sophisticated imaging center, you would see appliance-size equipment. $1 million X-ray machine, $2 million CAT scanner, $3 million MR machine, and this $20,000 ECG machine. And when the doctor asks the patient to go to the imaging center, the patient goes there. I want you to shift the scene for a moment to a poor country like India. Certainly, GE sells this $20,000 ECG machine in India to the top 10% of the economic pyramid. After all, there are going to be rich folks in poor countries, just like the way you have poor folks in rich countries. Certainly there are world-class hospitals in India, Apollo, Manipal, Fortis, which could afford to buy this $20,000 ECG machine. The question is, what about the remaining 90% of India? For the remaining 90% of India, this $20,000 ECG machine is practically useless. Why? The first and the most obvious reason is affordability. You see, on this $20,000 ECG machine, a single ECG scan will cost $200. 90% of Indians, most of them live in rural India. In rural India, people are making $2 a day or less. Now, you can do the mental math. If I'm making $2 a day and somebody tells me a single ECG scan will cost $200, I have to work for 100 days just to pay for one scan. That's only to decide whether I need further tests. I'm going to say, forget it. I can live with my chest pain. Now, suppose you found a rural area where every villager is willing to pay the $200 per scan. There is yet another problem. And that is, this $20,000 ECG machine works only on house current. And you know, in rural India, electricity is either unavailable or unreliable. So even if you manage to take this machine to a rural area, perhaps there is no electricity to operate this equipment. Suppose you found a rural area where everybody is willing to pay the $200 per scan. And let's assume there is 100% assured electricity. There is yet another problem. And that is, in most rural areas, there are no hospitals. If there are no hospitals, you can't ask the patient to go to the hospital. The hospital has to come to the patient. That means someone has got to take this equipment door to door. This $20,000 ECG machine weighs 500 pounds. If something weighs 500 pounds, I can't put it in my backpack and take it door to door. Suppose you manage to put it in a bus and take it to a village where, let's say, every village is willing to pay the $200 per scan. And let's also assume there is 100% assured electricity. There is yet another problem. And that is, this $20,000 ECG machine is extraordinarily powerful machine. This can be operated only by trained doctors. In fact, it usually comes with a 500-page user's manual. Well, in rural India, there are no trained doctors. That means for 90% of India, this $20,000 ECG machine is practically inaccessible. 90% of Indians are non-consumers of this $20,000 machine. That doesn't mean 90% of Indians don't suffer from heart attack. This is one of the main points that I want to drive home for you. Non-consumers have exactly the same problem as consumers. The reason they are non-consumers is because they can't consume the product you're giving to the consumers. Otherwise, they would already become consumers. If we can do breakthrough innovation, if you can do out-of-the-box innovation, then you have a potential to unlock enormous value. In fact, today on planet Earth, there are 7 billion people. Out of the 7 billion people, only 2 billion have the purchasing power to buy the goods and services corporations make today. 5 billion are too poor to afford to buy those goods and services. There are 5 billion non-consumers in the world today. Converting those 5 billion non-consumers into consumers is the single biggest growth opportunity for corporations. In 2008, when I went to work for General Electric, the very first project we did was to innovate this $500 ECG machine. You see, on this $500 ECG machine, a single ECG scan will cost 10 cents. If a single ECG scan costs 10 cents, even if I'm making only $2 a day, if I got a severe chest pain, I am willing to allocate 10 cents for a scan. In fact, my rule of thumb is, if you want to convert non-consumers into consumers in urban India, you better come up with a 10% solution. If you want to convert non-consumers into consumers in rural India, you better come up with a 1% solution. That means if a product costs $100 in the US, it better cost $10 in urban India. It better cost $1 in rural India. Besides being affordable, this $500 ECG machine is extremely lightweight. In fact, it weighs less than a can of Coca-Cola. If something weighs less than a can of Coca-Cola, I can put it in my backpack and take it door to door. Not only that, this $500 ECG machine operates on battery. On a single battery charge, it can produce 750 ECG scans. Finally, this $500 ECG machine is extremely simple to use. Perhaps you can't quite see it on this slide. It has got only two buttons. There is a green button and then there is a red button. You push the green button, it works. You push the red button, it stops. As long as you know how to read traffic signs, you should be able to operate this machine. GE has created